The TV5 videotape presentation.
Dorothy, yesterday and today. A visit with Dorothy Fuldheim on her 83rd birthday.
WEWS was Ohio's first television station, and Dorothy Fuldheim is a charter member of its staff. She is today America's senior television news broadcaster. But more important, no one who has ever worked in our field has made quite the impact on her community as she has. And I don't think any other broadcaster has touched as many lives in so meaningful a way as Dorothy Fuldheim. Dorothy, happy birthday, and thank you for letting us come to your beautiful home.
Did you mean what you said?
Indeed, I did, love.
Goodness, why didn't you tell me this long ago? I could have enjoyed it. How long have you been entertaining these ideas about me?
For a long time. For 17 years since I came to this town and saw you first. Now, when was it that you made the transition from actress to platform personality, the person who would go before groups of people and persuade them of things?
Well, it happened because I was on the stage. I was asked to speak against war because I was in an anti-war play called The State Forbids, and that was when Jane Addams asked me to appear. I remember it was in Philadelphia first time.
Let me ask about the things you first started doing on television. You'd been on radio, and then you came to television in 1947.
That's right.
What did you do first?
Well, they had an FM station at that time, as I recall it, and I would do commentaries. But we had a chap who was can't remember his name. He was a salesman. And he went out and he said I could sell Dorothy, Miss Fuldheim, because you see I was well known in Cleveland. I'd lectured a lot. We used to have 1,800 people come to my lectures. And he said I can sell her. So they said to me, what do you want to do? Well, I'd never done a television show. I didn't know anything about it. And in television I thought you have to be like a gazelle moving all the time. Mm-hmm. And I chose a format. And then I was the first one whom they sold across the board, a show every day. And I remember they had a big conference about it, but they didn't call me in. I was only the performer. They never called me in. And suddenly somebody thought, maybe we ought to call her in. So they did, and they said to me, what do you think about this? And I said, well, it's all right, but it's not what I do. So the tall, big guy said to me, well, what is it you do? And I said, I do commentaries. So he said, well, I have to phone Pittsburgh. So he phoned, and they said, oh, let her do whatever she wants. We're not going to keep her anyway. We just bought it to have the time. That was Duquesne.
And it stayed a long time.
17 and a half years. So I developed my own format. I think I had the oldest set in the whole country. We had it year after year, and I still feel the way. I don't think sets make any difference. I think it's the people.
How did the 1 o'clock club evolve?
Well, one day Mr. Henrihan came to me and said, he buttered me up. If I'd only been smart, I'd known it. He said, where did you get your personality? Well, that's the first time I ever knew I had one. I was just an ordinary sort of person as far as I was concerned. And he told me about this. We were the first ones, really, to put on a live show of that kind. The WWS has been very innovative. We've been very adventurous, have had the courage to do new things.
Did you think of yourself as a pioneer when you were doing those things?
No, I never did, nor did I think I was working for the women's movement. I'm a very conscientious craftsman. When I'm doing something, I'm very assiduous and punctilious about it. I never thought about that. I was earning a living. I didn't know that I was a pioneer. Of course, now as I look back at it, I must have had courage. I didn't have it at all. I just went on doing it.
Were you thinking in those days about what a powerhouse television was, how influential it was?
No. I did not realize it. I remember the day when I knew that television was powerful. I could give you the incident, the episode, and everything else. When I knew that television was the newest thing that had come to the world, more significant than flying, more significant than when we developed the airplane, more significant than when we went to the moon. Because here on Earth, on this planet, The dream of mankind is to have a unified world, and television will be the power that will do it. It was an incident that occurred right outside of our station. I was waiting for my car to pick me up. There's a bus stop, as you know. There was an old lady that got out. And she looked at me and she said, "Is it really you?" She didn't believe she could see me. Well, of course, to save myself embarrassment, she said, "Oh, I thought I'd never see you really in the flesh." I said to her, "You've been out visiting someplace." Well, I had a conversation with her. Told me she'd gone to see her daughter. I said, "Where do you live?" And you know, about 3 blocks down on 30th Street, there's that high rise. She told me she lived there. I knew that she wasn't working. I could tell it. I could also tell that her hands were arthritic, and I thought, well, so I said, "Are you working?" She said, "No." I said, "Well, do you have a pension?" She said, "No, but I have my Social Security." In any event, I found out that that's what she lives on. And that once a week she had come by bus, she goes to see her daughter who gives her the dinner for the next day, you see. And I asked her how much she got for Social Security. I think $165. I said, "How much do you pay rent?" She had $37. I said, "Well, are you all right?" She said, "Oh, I'm fine." And then she said to me, "And you know, I have 2 friends." And I said, "Who are they?" She said, "Television and God." Well, I suddenly knew. And when you realize that, every time you go on the air, you think, "Oh my God, I must do that which has integrity and morality and nobility, because it is going to cement the world that we have looked for a path that would do away with war." I think this is the path.
Dorothy, you once said, I think, that Helen Keller was the most impressive person, the most impressive human being you'd ever met.
It's correct. I will never forget it. Here's a woman who never saw a rose, never saw the light of a star, who never heard the sound of laughter, the sound of gushing water, and yet she was able to conceive of abstractions. I was so awed by her, I made up my mind I'd never complain about any of my physical infirmities or whatnot. It was a very moving experience.
Tell us about the Duke of Windsor. What was that encounter like?
Oh, he was charming. He was charming. He was the most urbane man I ever met. His urbanity was so great, and what a pity that they never used his talent. He was very nervous. He had the questions and the answers written out, on a teleprompter. He was very nervous about it. He appeared only twice on television, in this country anyway, once on a network and once on my show. And when it was all over, he said to me, "Oh, I wouldn't mind doing this with you again." I thought, "Brother, you've only got to ask, and I'll go anywhere with you." And he said to me, "Do you do this often?" I said, "Well, yes, every day." He said, "Why every day?" I said, "Well, to pay the rent, of course." He was just utterly charming. He went around and shook hands with the whole floor crew, He knew they didn't have to vote for anything. He charmed everybody.
Here you are, Dorothy, with a woman who was the first woman to serve in the United States Senate, I believe.
Oh.
You might have been that woman.
Senator Margaret Chase Smith, I must tell you something charming about that. I went to Taipei, and on the way I stopped in Honolulu because, there was no direct flight. And I disembarked, and the governor was standing there, and he kissed me on both cheeks, and he put a number of leis around me, and I thought, well, I knew I was famous, but I didn't know he knew about me down here. The only thing was he thought I was Senator Margaret Chase Smith, who was on the plane too, you see, and she came after I did. He had plenty of kisses left, but all the leis were around my throat. I don't think she was very enthusiastic about the incident.
Do you ever regret saying no to Steve Young that time he came over to speak to you and said, "Dorothy, we've got to have you run"?
Well, the number of times I've been asked, but I never would have the courage. I don't think I could take the kind of things that men who run for office take. They said I would have made a great candidate because I would have created controversy, but I really just couldn't. Sometimes I wonder about it, but I doubt whether I would have been happy.
Here's a famous bridge player. You know who that is?
Oh, that handsome, handsome chap. Sharif, is that his...
Omar Sharif, one of the world's great bridge players.
Is that what he is? God, he was beautiful. Just beautiful enough to make 100 women swoon.
How about Ben Spock? He was frequently on the 1 O'Clock Club, wasn't he, in the days when he was in Cleveland?
I'll never forgive him. I just never, never will forgive him.
For what?
Was it he who was responsible? I used to fight with my husband when my daughter was a baby. I wanted to pick her up when she cried. I don't know, the Spock or whoever it was. You said they mustn't pick him up. Well, I said, why? She's not a puppy dog. I want to love her. I don't care. And I used to walk around the block so that I wouldn't hear it. And I don't know if he was responsible for that.
Oh, they accused him of being the godfather of the permissive generation.
Oh, well, then I forgive him at once. I don't know who it was that was responsible for it. I can still remember it. You know, I was so agitated about it. And it never would happen when my husband was at home. I would sneak it with the slightest little whimper from her, and there I was.
How about Martin Luther King? What did he have?
What can one say? He had the gift of eloquence. And that is as rare and unique and extraordinary and moving a gift as that of singing or dancing or anything. He had that. But fate gave him a cue, and fate decided to use him for a great argument for desegregation of all kinds. He played a great part in the history of this country.
When you meet leaders like Hoffa, do you always perceive what it is that caused them to have the power that they have been able to use? And
well, there are very few of them in the country, very few. I interviewed the presidential candidates, and I didn't get that feeling about any one of them. Now, I may be wrong, you see, and they were really because I've interviewed all of them, Udall, you know, last week, Carter, and Reagan. Perhaps they were exhausted, they probably were, but there is something about men of achievement.
Who have been the greatest leaders of this century?
The scientists. Einstein, the greatest mind that appeared on the face of this earth in centuries. They've been the greatest leaders, not the political ones. If you really look at the whole picture, the political leaders have been devastating. From Hitler, Mussolini, Franz Joseph, all of them. It's the scientists who have opened all sorts of new doors. They have given us a world of magic.